7 Apache girls left hang to die until a rancher shows up. The sun had just begun to rise over the dusty plains, casting long, golden shadows across the rugged terrain. Birds chirped softly, unaware of the horror that had taken place overnight. In the quiet of the early morning, a lone rancher rode along a familiar path near the edge of the Apache settlement. His name was Tom Hawkins, a man whose life had been shaped by the harsh land he called home. He had seen danger before, storms that could strip a roof from a house, snakes that could strike without warning, and men who could act cruelly out of fear or greed. But nothing could have prepared him for what he would see that morning. Tom noticed movement ahead, though at first he thought it was just the wind playing tricks among the trees. As he got closer, the shadowy forms resolved into something horrifying. 7 small bodies hung from the limbs of a gnarled ancient tree, their figures swaying gently in the morning breeze. He pulled his horse to a sudden stop, his heart pounding. The sight was so shocking, so unbearably cruel, that for a moment he could not breathe. His eyes scanned the girls' faces, some pale, some bruised, all silent and still. He felt a surge of anger and sorrow that made his hands tremble. Without thinking, he dismounted and ran to the tree. Each rope seemed cruelly tight, and the girls' small bodies looked fragile as glass. Tom's mind raced, but his actions were quick. He carried a knife, a simple tool he used for everyday ranch work, and with steady hands, he began cutting the ropes, one by one. He lowered each girl carefully, cradling them to the ground. Some were unconscious, others groaned faintly, their eyes fluttering open, filled with confusion and terror. He whispered words of comfort, telling them they were safe now, even as the sun rose higher and burned down on the barren earth around them. Tom's knowledge of the land and his life on the ranch had taught him one thing: staying calm could save lives. He checked each girl for injuries. A few had scratches and bruises, but none were fatally wounded, though the fear in their eyes told him that the scars in their hearts would take longer to heal. He thought of the families who would come searching for their daughters, hoping they were safe, never imagining what had happened. The thought made him grip his knife tighter, not out of aggression, but out of determination. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had wanted to hurt these girls. As he worked, he noticed the surroundings carefully. Broken branches, footprints in the dirt, disturbed patches of grass. It all told a story. The perpetrators had come quietly, leaving little evidence, but their presence was undeniable. They had planned this, watched, and acted with cruelty. Tom felt a cold anger settle over him, but he pushed it down. Right now, his focus was the girls. Survival came first. Justice could wait. He gathered the girls close, using his jacket to cover them from the chill of the morning wind. One of them, a small girl no older than 10, clutched his arm and sobbed quietly. Her tears were silent, but they burned deep, the kind of tears that come from fear and disbelief. Tom spoke to her gently, telling her she was safe, that the danger had passed, that no one would hurt her again. Slowly she calmed, leaning her head against his chest, still trembling, but alive. The other girls, sensing his strength and calm, began to relax slightly, though the fear in their eyes did not fade entirely. Tom knew he had to get help. The nearest town was miles away, but he had a network of neighbors, friends, and community members who trusted him. He called out, his voice echoing across the desert, hoping someone would hear. Soon other ranchers and local Apache men arrived, drawn by the sound of his calls and the urgency in his tone. They worked together, lifting the girls onto horses and blankets, carrying them gently toward the safety of Tom's ranch house. It was a slow process, each movement measured, careful not to jostle the injured or frightened girls. As they moved, the girls began to murmur, telling bits and pieces of what had happened. They had been playing near the edge of the settlement the day before when strangers had appeared, asking questions, watching them closely. They remembered shadows, voices, a feeling of being followed. Nothing had seemed dangerous at first, but now it was clear they had been targeted. The stories were fragmented, scared, and whispered, but Tom listened carefully, piecing together what he could. Every detail mattered. Every detail might prevent another tragedy. By mid-morning, they reached Tom's ranch. He immediately called local authorities, explaining what had happened and asking for medical assistance. While waiting for help, he continued tending to the girls. Some were given water, others were wrapped in warm blankets. He spoke to them as he worked, telling them stories of the land, of animals that survived harsh winters, of the resilience that lived in every person who called the plains home. His calm presence was a shield against the lingering terror, a reminder that they were no longer alone. Neighbors and community members began to arrive, drawn by word of mouth and the cries of relief and concern. Some were relatives, clutching at their heads, crying in disbelief. Others were neighbors who had known the girl since birth, holding each other and shaking with fear and anger. They looked at Tom with gratitude and awe, recognizing that his quick action had saved lives. But there was no time to celebrate yet. The girl's safety was only the beginning. Someone had wanted them dead, and the questions of who and why hung over the ranch like a dark cloud. Tom felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He was not only a rescuer now, but a protector, a guide, a guardian for these girls in the immediate hours after the attack. He stayed by their side, ensuring they were comfortable, listening to their fears, and reassuring them that help was coming. He made plans to keep them safe while authorities conducted their investigation, knowing that the danger might not be entirely over. Whoever had done this could still be nearby, watching, waiting. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky a brilliant blue, the rancher finally allowed himself a moment to reflect. He thought of the courage it took to act, to face the horror without turning away. He thought of the girls, so young, so vulnerable, and yet alive because he had not hesitated. And he thought of the larger world outside this quiet desert settlement. A world that could be cruel, but also one where ordinary people could do extraordinary things. In that moment, the rancher understood something profound. Courage was not about fearlessness. It was about acting even when fear was present. It was about responsibility, compassion, and the refusal to let cruelty go unanswered. And while the girls would need months, perhaps years, to fully recover from the trauma they had suffered, the first step had been taken. They were alive. They were safe, and someone had shown up when it mattered most. As emergency vehicles appeared on the horizon, sirens faintly cutting through the desert stillness, the rancher stayed by the girls' side, holding their hands, whispering reassurances. He knew the coming days would be hard. Medical treatments, questioning by authorities, rebuilding trust. But he also knew that the seeds of hope had been planted, and in the quiet moments before the chaos of rescue and investigation took over, he allowed himself a small, quiet relief. The girls were alive. That was enough for now. After the girls were safely brought to the ranch, the air was filled with a mixture of relief and tension. Tom Hawkins, the rancher who had saved them, stayed close to ensure each girl received the attention she needed. The early morning sun had climbed higher, and the warmth of the day began to contrast sharply with the cold terror of what had happened. The ranch, usually a place of routine and quiet work, now buzzed with urgency. Blankets, clean clothes, and warm drinks were brought to comfort the girls. Each movement, each gentle word, was meant to ease their fear and remind them they were no longer alone. The smallest girl, Maria, who had clung to Tom's arm during the rescue, refused to leave his side. Her tiny hand gripped his, her knuckles white from fear. Her eyes darted around the ranch as though searching for the shadows she had glimpsed the day before. Tom knelt to her level and spoke softly. "You're safe now, Maria. No one can hurt you here. I promise." She blinked at him, her tears slowly subsiding. The gentle tone, the steady presence, began to work like a shield against the panic that still coursed through her. Other girls sat quietly on the blankets, some whispering to one another, trying to make sense of what had happened. Tom observed them carefully, noting the subtle signs of trauma, flinches at sudden noises, nervous glances at strangers, and the way some girls hugged themselves tightly. He knew from experience that fear could linger long after physical danger had passed. "We'll take it one step at a time," he told himself. "We'll keep them safe and let them heal." Soon the local authorities arrived, Officers and paramedics had traveled from the nearest town, their faces a mixture of concern and determination. Tom briefed them quickly, explaining the situation, the condition of the girls, and what he had noticed at the scene. Paramedics began their careful work, checking vital signs, cleaning minor injuries, and making sure no hidden wounds went unnoticed. The girls, initially frightened by the uniformed strangers, slowly began to feel a sense of safety reinforced by Tom's calm presence beside them. Meanwhile, the community began to gather. News had spread rapidly, and soon neighbors, relatives, and friends of the girls appeared, some running, some walking slowly with heavy hearts. There were tears, hugs, and quiet murmurs of disbelief. The Apache families, torn between relief and shock, crowded around the ranch wanting to see their daughters to reassure themselves that they were alive. The rancher welcomed them with a firm but kind demeanor, allowing each family member to approach the girls safely. Some cried openly. Others stood silently, fists clenched in anger or grief. Tom noticed how cautious the community was. Fear still lingered not only of the unknown attackers but of future dangers. He understood their concern. Even with the girls rescued, the presence of someone willing to commit such cruelty meant that vigilance was necessary. While authorities handled the formal investigation, Tom focused on making the girls feel secure. He brought out blankets, offered water, and created a small, quiet space for them to sit together. Some girls held each other, finding comfort in their shared presence. Others simply closed their eyes, trying to escape the memory of being left helpless. As the day passed, the girls began to speak softly about what had happened. They recalled playing near the edge of their settlement the day before when strange men had appeared. Watching from a distance, their voices were shaky, fragmented, but they remembered details. A shadowy figure standing near the fence, low voices whispering in anger, and a sense that something bad was going to happen. Tom listened attentively, asking gentle questions without pressuring them. Every detail was a clue, a thread that could lead authorities closer to understanding who had tried to harm them. The rancher's calm and steady presence made a difference. He explained things simply. "You did nothing wrong. You are brave for surviving. We will find out who did this, and they will be stopped." His words were not empty promises. They were filled with the weight of action. The girls, slowly realizing they were no longer alone, began to respond. Small nods, quiet murmurs, and even tentative smiles appeared. The first seeds of trust and courage were being planted, though fear still lingered like a shadow over them. Tom also worked to coordinate with the authorities. He shared what he had observed at the tree: footprints, disturbed grass, and broken branches. He described the pattern of the ropes, the placement of the girls, and the evidence that suggested planning rather than random cruelty. His detailed account helped the officers understand that the attack was deliberate. Someone had watched the girls, waited for the right moment, and acted with cruelty. This realization shocked the community. Who could commit such an act, and why? While discussions about investigation and security continued, Tom also thought about the long-term safety of the girls. He considered ways to keep them protected, including temporary housing at his ranch, supervised visits from families, and careful planning to prevent any further attempts at harm. The girls needed time to recover, both physically and emotionally, and the rancher was determined to provide that time. He spent hours sitting with them, telling stories of the land, teaching them simple survival skills, and reminding them of the strength they carried inside themselves. In the afternoon, a few brave neighbors joined Tom in helping care for the girls. Some brought food, others blankets and toys to make them feel at home. The girls began to explore their temporary surroundings cautiously, still wary, but curious. Laughter, soft and hesitant, started to break through the tension as they played quietly on the grass. Tom watched, a mixture of relief and pride in his chest. The first steps toward healing were always small, but they were essential. As evening approached, the girls' families gathered for a meeting with the authorities and Tom. Officers explained the next steps, questioning the girls carefully, checking local records, and increasing patrols around the community. Tom spoke about safety measures, emphasizing that everyone needed to work together to prevent future harm. Families listened attentively, some still shaking, but hope was beginning to grow alongside their fear. The rancher reminded them gently, This was not your fault. You are safe now, and we will make sure it stays that way." That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the desert cooled, Tom stayed with the girls in the main house. Some slept in blankets on the floor, others on cots brought in for comfort. Tom sat nearby, keeping watch. Every sound in the quiet desert, the rustle of leaves, the cry of a distant animal, even the wind brushing against the walls, was a reminder of vigilance. But for the first time since the morning, there was also a sense of peace. The girls were alive, and they were not alone. As he looked around, Tom thought about courage. Not just his own, but the courage of the girls, surviving an event that could have taken their lives. He thought about the importance of community, of people coming together in times of crisis. And he thought about justice, knowing that finding the perpetrators would take time, patience, and careful planning. But that was a challenge for another day. Tonight, survival and comfort were what mattered most. The girls, gradually drifting into sleep, clutched blankets or small hands of friends and family nearby. Their eyes, once wide with terror, now slowly closed in the safety of a warm room. Tom felt a quiet satisfaction, but he knew the work was far from over. The attack had been deliberate, and someone had intended harm. But the first and most critical step had been taken. The girls were safe, alive, and beginning to trust again. In the stillness of the night, Tom thought about tomorrow. He would help authorities continue their investigation. He would continue to watch over the girls, ensuring their safety and comfort. He would continue to remind them of their courage, the strength they carried inside themselves. And he would never forget the lesson of this day, that action, compassion, and bravery could save lives. Even in the darkest moments, there was hope. And for these 7 Apache girls, that hope had arrived in the form of a rancher who refused to turn away when it mattered most. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert plains, painting the horizon in shades of gold and orange. Tom Hawkins, the rancher who had saved the 7 Apache girls, was already awake, moving quietly around the ranch. Today would be different. Today was the day to uncover more about what had happened to the girls and to make sure no danger lingered nearby. The events of the previous day had left a deep mark on everyone involved, but Tom understood that action was necessary to prevent another tragedy. He started by retracing the path he had taken when he first discovered the girls. He examined the ground carefully, looking for footprints, broken branches, or any sign that could give a clue about the attackers. The desert was harsh and often unforgiving, but it also revealed small details for those willing to pay attention. Tom noticed faint marks in the sand, footprints that did not belong to any local residents. Some were small, some larger, suggesting that several people had been present. There were also scuff marks near the tree where the girls had been hanging, showing that the attackers had approached carefully and planned each step. As he walked, Tom reflected on the girls' stories from the previous day. They had mentioned shadows, whispering voices, and the feeling of being watched. Though their memories were fragmented and scared, Tom knew that even small details could make a difference. He decided to take careful notes, combining what he had observed with what the girls had described. Every detail, no matter how minor it seemed, could help authorities understand the events and identify those responsible. By mid-morning, local law enforcement had joined him. Officers came from the nearest town bringing tools for investigation, notebooks, cameras, and a careful, methodical approach. Tom guided them to the locations he had identified, pointing out footprints, scuff marks, and broken branches. The officers examined everything closely, asking questions and recording observations. They were impressed by Tom's attention to detail and his knowledge of the land. His experience on the ranch gave him an insight that few others had, a familiarity with patterns, tracks, and signs that were easy to miss. Meanwhile, the girls remained at the ranch, gradually becoming more comfortable in their temporary safe space. A few of them ventured outside under supervision, watching as Tom and the authorities examined the surroundings. Their fear had not completely disappeared, but it had shifted into cautious curiosity. Maria, the smallest girl, held tightly to a blanket and watched Tom carefully, her trust in him growing with every gentle word and action. The other girls began to talk quietly among themselves, sharing small observations about the people they had seen near the settlement the day before. Their voices were low but important, each fragment of memory a piece of the puzzle. Tom realized that the next step was to find where the attackers might have come from. He knew the terrain well, the hills, the hidden valleys, and the small trails that connected the settlement to the outside world. He decided to follow the footprints and marks through a nearby dry creek bed, carefully noting where the attackers might have entered and exited. The officers followed closely, taking photographs and making sketches of the paths. It was slow work, but patience was crucial. One mistake could mean losing the trail entirely. As they moved, Tom began to recognize patterns. The attackers had come from a hidden trail not far from the settlement, one that few people used. They had watched the girls for days, observing their routines and waiting for an opportunity to act. The careful planning made Tom's blood run cold. These were not careless individuals. They were deliberate and dangerous. Yet, despite the fear he felt, he refused to allow panic to take over. Calm, careful action was necessary. The girls' safety depended on it. During the afternoon, Tom and the officers reached a secluded area that appeared to have been used as a temporary camp. There were discarded wrappers, a few small tools, and signs of a fire that had been extinguished. Tom examined everything with care, noting even small details that might have been overlooked. He saw a pattern in the way the items were arranged, suggesting organization and purpose. "This wasn't random," he said quietly. "They planned everything." The officers nodded, understanding that the case was more serious than it had first appeared. Back at the ranch, the girls were slowly gaining confidence. They spoke more freely about what they remembered, describing how the strangers had moved, the sound of their voices, and the expressions they had seen. Some details were small: a scratch on a fence post, a torn piece of cloth. But Tom recorded everything carefully. He knew that these small pieces of evidence could eventually point to the attackers' identities. More importantly, listening to the girls and taking their words seriously helped them regain a sense of control. They were no longer helpless victims. They were witnesses, with voices that mattered. As evening approached, the investigation team returned to the ranch to rest and review the day's findings. Maps were spread across tables, notes were compared, and photographs were examined. Tom worked alongside the officers, helping them connect the dots between the footprints, camp, and the girls' accounts. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. The attackers were not strangers passing through randomly. They had a reason for targeting the girls. Their actions suggested anger, cruelty, and a desire to intimidate the community. This realization made Tom's determination grow stronger. He would not allow fear to control the settlement. He would protect the girls and ensure justice. During the night, Tom stayed awake, thinking through every detail he had observed. He reflected on the courage the girls had shown, surviving an attack that could have been fatal. He thought about the families, their grief, and their fear, and how important it was to restore a sense of safety. He also considered the broader community. Fear could spread quickly, paralyzing people from taking action. By showing calm, deliberate courage, he could help the community regain confidence and strength. The next morning, Tom led a small team back to the site of the camp. They carefully searched for more clues, paying attention to anything that might indicate where the attackers were hiding or where they had gone after the attempt on the girls. Among the items left behind, they found small personal belongings, including a notebook with scribbled notes and symbols. Though the notes were difficult to read, they suggested that the attackers had been observing the settlement for weeks. Tom felt a mix of anger and resolve. He would see that those responsible were found back. Tom also worked to build trust with the girls further. He encouraged them to describe in detail anything they remembered about the attackers, reassuring them that their words were important. Some girls were hesitant, afraid that speaking could bring danger. Tom reminded them gently, "You are safe now. No one can hurt you here. Your words are important. They help us make sure this doesn't happen again." Slowly, they began to open up more, describing the attackers' clothing, the way they spoke, and the path they had taken. Every detail added another piece to the puzzle. By midday, the investigation had uncovered a new lead. A local resident remembered seeing strangers moving through the area a few days prior. acting strangely and asking unusual questions about the settlement. Tom coordinated with the officers to follow up, tracing the movements of these individuals. The terrain was challenging, but Tom's knowledge of the desert allowed the team to track signs that others might have missed. They found footprints leading toward a hidden canyon, a place that could serve as a temporary hideout. Tom felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The attackers were close, but he was ready to face whatever came next. Back at the ranch, the girls spent time drawing pictures and telling stories about their lives before the attack. These small acts of normalcy were important for healing. Tom encouraged them to focus on positive memories, helping to balance the fear they still carried. He sat with them quietly, sharing stories of animals and life on the ranch, reminding them that life could be safe and joyful. Slowly, laughter began to return to the ranch, soft but meaningful, a sign that hope was beginning to grow.
As evening fell, Tom reviewed the day's findings with the officers.
They had a clearer idea of who might be responsible and where they might be hiding. Plans were made for a careful approach, one that would ensure the girls' safety and avoid unnecessary risk. Tom felt the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of purpose. He had acted once to save lives. Now he would act again to protect the community and bring justice. Late that night, Tom walked outside alone, looking at the stars above the desert. He thought about the courage of the girls, the strength of the community, and the importance of standing firm in the face of fear. He knew that the next step would be critical, finding the attackers and ensuring they could not harm anyone again. But he also knew that careful planning, patience, and courage would guide him. And as he looked at the silent desert, he promised himself that he would not fail. The girls' lives, the trust of the community, and the hope for safety depended on him. The sun had barely risen over the desert plains when Tom Hawkins and the local authorities prepared to take the next step. Weeks of careful investigation, patient tracking, and gathering of evidence had led them to a hidden canyon several miles from the Apache settlement. It was a secluded place surrounded by high cliffs and jagged rocks, where the attackers had set up a temporary camp. Tom knew that this confrontation would be delicate. The safety of the girls, the community, and even the officers depended on careful planning and calm action. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders, but he also felt the quiet strength that had guided him through the previous days. The canyon was quiet as the team approached. Tom led the way, his eyes scanning the rocky terrain for any sign of movement. Officers moved carefully behind him, radios in hand, ready to communicate with the team. Every footstep was deliberate, every shadow noted. The attackers had been clever, leaving little evidence behind, but patience and attention to detail had brought Tom and the authorities here. He whispered a brief warning to the officers. "Stay calm. Move slowly. Our goal is to stop them, not escalate danger." The team nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. As they neared the camp, faint signs of recent activity became visible. Broken twigs, scattered tools, and small fire remnants told the story of recent occupancy. Tom paused, examining a scrap of cloth caught on a bush. It matched the description the girls had given days before. His pulse quickened, not with fear, but with determination. The culprits were here. They had been watching, perhaps even thinking they could avoid consequences. But Tom and the authorities had come prepared. The first confrontation was careful and strategic. Officers called out from a distance, announcing their presence and commanding the individuals in the camp to surrender. There was a tense silence for a moment, broken only by the wind sweeping through the canyon. Then, movement. Shadows shifted behind rocks and low bushes. A few figures stepped forward cautiously, hands raised, showing they were unarmed. Tom remained calm, maintaining a steady stance between the authorities and the canyon dwellers. The careful approach worked. The attackers were cornered, and their dangerous intent neutralized without violence. Once the individuals were in custody, officers began questioning them. Tom watched closely, noting the reactions, the hesitation, and the tone of voice. The culprits admitted that they had planned to scare the girls and the community, though thankfully no one had been fatally harmed. Their motives were a mix of malice, prejudice, and a desire for control. fueled by misguided anger. Hearing this made Tom's anger flare briefly, but he quickly pushed it down. The goal was justice, not revenge. He focused on ensuring the girls and the community would remain safe. Back at the ranch, the girls were slowly beginning to understand that those who had tried to harm them were no longer a threat. Families gathered around, relief evident in every expression. The parents hugged their daughters tightly, tears streaming down their faces, while others simply held their hands, whispering words of reassurance. The ranch had become a place of safety and healing, a sanctuary in the midst of fear. Tom moved quietly among them, offering comfort, a calm presence that reminded everyone that life could continue even after such darkness. The girls began to share more stories, memories of their time before the attack, and small details they had previously held back out of fear. Their voices grew stronger, their words clearer, and their laughter, once hesitant and rare, began to return. Tom encouraged them to draw, write, and play, helping them reclaim a sense of normalcy. Each small act of confidence was a victory, a step toward healing. He reminded them gently, "You survived. You are brave. You can grow stronger every day." The girls listened, absorbing the words and allowing themselves to feel safe again. Community members also began to participate in the healing process. They organized small gatherings, helping the girls feel connected to others and reminding them that the community stood together. Local teachers and elders visited, offering encouragement and sharing stories of resilience. The Apache settlement, once paralyzed by fear, began to regain a sense of unity and confidence. People spoke openly about the importance of vigilance, cooperation, and support for one another. Tom encouraged this, emphasizing that strength came not only from action, but from the bonds that tied the community together. As the days passed, the investigation progressed smoothly. Authorities reviewed all evidence collected by Tom and the officers. Footprints, discarded items, and witness statements were carefully compiled. The culprits were formally charged, and legal proceedings began. Tom remained involved, providing testimony and guidance where needed. He was careful to keep the girls and their families informed, ensuring they felt safe and supported throughout the process. The law moved at its own pace, but every step taken reinforced the sense that justice would be served. Meanwhile, the girls continued their journey of recovery. Physical healing was straightforward. Minor bruises and scratches were treated and regular routines were restored, but emotional healing required patience. Tom spent hours with them, helping them confront their fears in small ways. They explored the ranch, learned about animals, and practiced simple survival skills. Each lesson was paired with reassurance and encouragement, teaching the girls that the world could be safe and even joyful. Slowly, smiles returned. Timid at first, then growing stronger each day. One evening, Tom sat with the girls around a small campfire in the ranch yard. The air was cool, the desert quiet except for the soft crackle of the flames. The girls shared stories, not of fear but of hope, imagination, and dreams for the future. One girl spoke of wanting to be a teacher, another of caring for animals, and yet another of exploring the desert safely. Tom listened, smiling quietly, realizing that this was more than recovery. It was transformation. The girls were reclaiming their lives, guided by courage and the support of those who cared for them. The community continued to show gratitude to Tom, but he remained humble. He knew that the real victory was the girls' survival and the restoration of trust within the community. He spent time with families discussing safety plans, emergency procedures, and ways to ensure that no similar threat could harm them again. Together, they reinforced fences, marked trails, and created systems of communication. The settlement, once shaken by fear, began to feel secure, stronger, and more connected than ever before. In the weeks that followed, the legal process reached a resolution. The attackers were held accountable for their actions, and the community felt a sense of justice and closure. While the emotional scars would take time to fade completely, the knowledge that the culprits could no longer harm anyone brought relief. Tom continued to work quietly in the background, ensuring that the girls had access to counseling, education, and opportunities for play and learning. His presence remained a steady force, a reminder that bravery and compassion could overcome even the darkest of threats. The ranch became a symbol of hope and resilience. Neighbors and families visited regularly, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. The girls thrived in this environment, their courage growing each day. Tom reflected on the journey, understanding that heroism was not only in dramatic action but in the quiet, persistent care that followed. Courage was about presence, patience, and unwavering support. By being there when it mattered most, he had helped transform fear into hope, despair into strength. One afternoon, the girls gathered around Tom as he taught them how to track animal footprints in the sand. They laughed as he explained the differences between coyote, rabbit, and deer prints, their curiosity and energy a sharp contrast to the fear they had once carried. "See," Tom said, smiling, "the world is full of signs. You just have to look closely, pay attention, and act with courage when needed." The girls nodded eagerly, their eyes bright and confident, a sign that the lessons went beyond the ranch. They were lessons for life. As the weeks turned into months, the settlement regained its sense of normalcy. Community events resumed. Children played safely in open spaces, and families shared meals and stories without fear. Tom remained a quiet but constant presence, a guardian and mentor. The girls, once victims of a terrifying plot, had become symbols of resilience, bravery, and hope. They learned that even in the darkest moments, action, kindness, and courage could create light. In the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the desert was bathed in soft pink and purple hues, Tom sat quietly outside his ranch. He thought about the journey, the danger, the rescue, the investigation, and the healing. He thought about the girls, their families, and the community. Most of all, he thought about the power of human courage and compassion. By stepping forward, by refusing to turn away, he had made a difference that would echo through the lives of the girls and their community for years to come. The story of the 7 Apache girls, once left in danger, had become a story of hope. The girls were alive, protected, and surrounded by people who cared deeply for their safety. The attackers had been stopped and the community had come together in strength and unity. Tom Hawkins, the rancher who had acted without hesitation, had shown that even ordinary individuals could perform extraordinary deeds. Courage, care, and persistence had saved lives. And in the quiet desert, under the watchful stars, the girls began to look forward to a future filled with safety, joy, and opportunity.